And we are back with the San Francisco Giants franchise. It's been a couple days since I've posted anything to this channel because I've taken a little bit of a break. I actually just ordered a new PC and it got here the other day, so I've got that all set up and running. I've actually got a good PC now, so that means it's just easier for me to edit and render videos, and also I'm able to record in 1080p now. This video won't be in 1080p because this was recorded before I got the new PC, but from next episode onwards, we'll be living in the year past 2014 and recording in 1080p because I am, of course, late on upgrading as always. But as you can see, we are at the All-Star break in the Giants franchise, so let's dive on in to the episode. Of course, starting things off with the standings in the National League, starting things off with the NL East, you've got the Atlanta Braves who have a pretty big lead on the division. They are surging as well, 9-1 in their last 10 games, while the Mets, the Nationals, and the Phillies are all around the same 11 to 13 games back in the division. Taking a look at the Central, which is much tighter than the NL East. You've got the Brewers sitting in first place, but it's only a 3.5 game lead on the Chicago Cubs, while the Reds are in third, only 4 games back, while the Pirates and Cardinals, that's where it starts to taper off in that division, and they are the cellar dwellers of the division. And the Cardinals definitely have rebounded from their 3-16 start or whatever it was when they were playing us, but definitely not a good team either. And then if we take a look at our division, the National League West, we sit atop the division with a sizable 11.5 game lead on the San Diego Padres, who have gotten worse. Their pitching may have gotten better, but their offense definitely took a major hit this season, and so far in the standings, it is showing as they are, like I said, 11.5 games back, while the D-backs are actually the new third-place team. Just a couple seasons ago, they were like the worst team in baseball, and now they're starting to actually make some ground in the division as they are the new third-place team, and they are over 500. They're actually 8-2 in their last 10 as well, while the Dodgers and the Colorado Rockies have both been terrible in this 2025 campaign. And if you take a look at the National League wild card, it is actually a pretty tight wild card race with San Diego and Chicago sitting 1-2 in the wild card right now, but then the Reds, Mets, D-backs, Nationals, and Phillies are all anywhere from a half game back to 3 games back, so they are all very much within striking distance of getting in the wild card, and then even the Pirates are only 5 games back, so it is a very tight National League wild card race, sort of like it is in real life, where it seems like everybody has a chance. And then we move on to the American League. The Red Sox sit atop the AL East with a 7.5 game lead on the second place Tampa Bay Rays, while the Jays are actually in third place. Not really competing for the division, but they are in third place. And then the Orioles are in fourth place, which means the New York Yankees are sitting at last place in the American League East below that abysmal Orioles team, which I should mention has not gotten any better. It's not like they've made improvements. They're still a very, very bad team. It's just the New York Yankees have done a total 180 because they lost all their stars, and they've decided to replace their stars with guys like Rafael Bautista. And then in the Central, you've got the Tigers sitting atop that division. They only have a 2.5 game lead on the Minnesota Twins, though, so definitely not already a settled division. And then the Royals are still in it as well with a 6.5 game deficit to make up in that division, while the White Sox and the Indians are the cellar dwellers of the Central. The American League West, the Angels are atop that division with a sizable 9 game lead, while the A's, the Astros, and the Mariners are all having at least decent seasons. It's just the Angels have been really great this year. And then the wild card in the American League is also tight, not as tight as the National League is, but the A's, Royals, Astros, Mariners, and Jays are all still very much in the hunt for those 1 and 2 wild card spots, as right now it's Tampa Bay and Minnesota sitting atop in those 1-2 spots. Now, since this is the All-Star Break episode, of course, we are showing off the All-Star teams, starting with the National League, where Julio Urias starts the game for the NL squad, and Derek Rodriguez finally going to be getting some credit for a good season. He got snubbed from the All-Star game so many times with us. He probably should have won at least like two Cy Youngs with us as well, but he got snubbed for those as well because he just didn't have enough wins or whatever the case was. Gilberto Fuentes made the All-Star team at first base, and our former prospect and sort of bench player in Seth Beer, now the starting first baseman for the Pittsburgh Pirates, made the All-Star game. Colin Moran, our half-season player last year, is now the starter at second base for the Mets. Joey Gallo starting at third. Javi Baez is the shortstop starter. And then, of course, Elliot Ramos is the starter in center field. That is the second year in a row that he has been the All-Star Game starter in center field. And if we take a look at the American League, Parker Bridwell is actually the starter for the AL squad. Their top closer was Greg Lyons of the Seattle Mariners. Francisco Mejia makes it in his first year off the Padres with the Oakland Athletics. Jose Altuve misses the All-Star game completely, and Steven Prather of the Detroit Tigers is the starter at second base, while Luis Urias, also in his first year off the Padres, is the starter at shortstop for the Los Angeles Angels. While Albert Almora is having another great year with the Mariners, still a superstar player out there, but Akil Baddoo is actually the center field starter with the Texas Rangers. So that's enough of the All-Star players. Now let's move on to taking a look at our team, starting things off with Elliot Ramos, who, like I mentioned, had an incredible first half. That's why he's the center field starter for the National League squad. A 1.009 OPS, 24 home runs. He has truly developed into a superstar player for us. Gilberto Fuentes is, of course, having another solid season, an 8.96 OPS, 17 home runs, 13 swipe bags at the break. He's actually starting against left-handed pitching this year, so that means more at-bats for Mr. Gilberto Fuentes. Joey Gallo, solid first half for Pico de Gallo as well, a 900 even OPS, 26 home runs, which does lead the National League. We'll get into that a bit later on in the episode. Javi Baez, same deal for El Mago, another great He's having a great first half, not another one, because last year he had a sub-700 OPS at the break, and then he went on to win MVP. So this year, having a good first half, that means he'll either stink it up in the second half and really hurt our team, or he'll put up like a 1.500 OPS because of just some absurd magic that he summons with being El Mago. And then Ryan Hacker is still handling the majority of the catching duties for our team, and he's been great. An 8.43 OPS through 160 ABs. He gets on base a ton. I mean, what else can you ask for from a guy who's a C-potential guy who's just getting an opportunity because Joey Bart's been bad, and he's ran with the opportunity. Jock Peterson has definitely had the worst first half that Jock has had with us. Still above league average, obviously, just not the usual Jock that we're used to seeing on our team. This is also the last year of his contract, and this could very well be his last season in a Giants uniform. He'll be 33 next year. We've got a bunch of outfield prospects. Want to give those guys more opportunities, and Jock Peterson definitely on the wrong side of 30, having the worst year of his career with us. Probably going to be the end of his tenure next season. And unfortunately, Jairo Munoz is having a down year in his first year with us. His average and his OBP are down quite a bit. He has been well over a 300 hitter the past 3 years, and he's always been above a 300 hitter throughout the duration of this franchise. His OBP is usually in the high 300s or in the 400s. This year, it's down all the way to 337. So I'm hoping that in the second half he can really start to put things together and get back to being St. Louis Cardinals Jairo Munoz. Hopefully this is just like a little bit of growing pains, a little bit of new territory that he's not quite familiar with. It took Javi Baez like a solid majority of the first season to really settle in as a Giant as well, so maybe this is a similar issue. And then Lorenzo Ordonez, he had a great year last year, having a down first half this year, only a 750 OPS, OBP is only 350, still pretty decent, just not like the absurd OBP he had last year, and he's also not walking more than he's striking out, definitely not striking out a ton, and he's still walking plenty, it's just he's not having the absurd year that he had last year. And now on to the bench players, where we have Gavin LaValle, who's been pretty good off the bench. He started at first base against lefties for like the first 2 weeks of the season, and then I was just like, let's just throw Fuentes in there, give him a shot. So now LaValle basically just gets starts here and there whenever someone needs a rest day, plus he pinch hits and then gets defensive substitution opportunities as well, because he is an extremely good defensive corner infielder. But he still has an 848 OPS despite not getting a ton of ABs, only 91, so Gavin LaValle's been pretty solid coming off the bench, and then Connor Panis has been not great. Usually we have one guy who's really tearing it up as a platoon guy, or just having a breakout year, and well, LaValle is sort of having a pretty good year. He's not really getting a ton of opportunities, and doesn't really fit the criteria for that. This year, a lot of our bench players aren't performing, so Panis, unfortunately, the legend of Pan the Man, might ultimately come down to being a one-year wonder, as he has not been good at all this year. Through 134 ABs, he only has a 707 OPS, so we might have to seriously look at him and possibly look at waiving him and sending him back down to AAA. And then possibly the most depressing part of this episode will be that Peter Mooney, we are probably witnessing the end of the era of the 5'6" hit machine. It was super fun while it lasted. We got 3 very solid years out of him. He won Rookie of the Year his first season, coming up as he was either a 29-year-old or 30-year-old rookie, and then he had 2 other seasons just being the everyday starter where he was hitting like 15, 16 home runs with like a mid-800 OPS. The guy was legitimately a hit machine, the 5'6" hit machine. And last year we saw his slugging totally dip off while his average and OBP stayed the same. This year his OBP has totally dropped off as well, so he's also never really been a good defensive player, so he's just not an effective player to have on the team right now because he can't hit, he can't field, so unfortunately Peter Mooney is probably going to be seeing a DFA relatively soon, so we can call up one of our infield prospects, which we'll get into a bit later on in the video. Derek Klauboff has also been pretty bad. Only 88 ABs, so not a huge sample size, but a terrible 606 OPS. He is, however, getting starts in left field now that Connor Panis has been proving that he's not doing well, and we're trying to give Klauboff some more ABs, so hopefully with more ABs that will mean a better production. But if not, we might have to look into AAA for guys who could come up and do a better job of the big leagues. And then Joey Bart has just been flat out disappointing, a 607 OPS, only 5 home runs through 159 ABs, so not a super small sample size either, and unfortunately he is way better defensively than Ryan Hacker, but unfortunately defensive catcher ratings are pretty meaningless in this game. It doesn't affect pop time, everybody has the same pop time, it doesn't block pitches or anything like that better. Really the only one that matters is arm strength, and Hacker's is actually better than Bart's. I mean, obviously, I haven't done any extensive testing, and this isn't like scientific proof that these ratings don't matter, but I really don't think there's much of a difference at all between a 50 blocking rating and a 90 blocking rating. I mean, if a ball goes in the dirt, it's going to get by the catcher in this game. That's just how it works. So that is another thing that this game should improve, and that's a gameplay thing, because usually gameplay is something that they are pretty solid on. It's a lot of just like the modes and the way franchise mode works that needs to be improved. But this is a gameplay thing, where maybe, make catchers actually matter, because that is a pretty big part of baseball. You ever ask yourself why this random Major League team is starting a guy who can't hit at all at catcher? It's because that guy is obviously the best catcher they have, and if they would rather have a guy who can handle their pitching staff and be a defensive catcher and do all the things the catchers do, if he can't hit, they'll gladly take the defensive side of it. But in this game, there's literally no upside to having a defensive catcher or a poor defensive catcher because they function the same in-game. But enough with that, let's go on to the pitching side of things, where Chris Sale is having another great year. His ERA is actually on pace to be the highest he's had throughout this franchise, but I mean, a 3.33 ERA is not bad at all. It's just not prime Chris Sale. And then Jay Groom, also pitching very well yet again. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt again like he did last year and miss the playoffs. I mean, he's by no means injury prone. He was just unlucky last year because he has like a high 80s durability. He just got hit with the injury bug last year, unfortunately. And then Marco Murillo, He has not been as good as his rookie season last year, but I mean, a 4.35 ERA, a 4.19 FIP is still quite serviceable, so I'm not worried about him at all. JB Bukauskas has gotten the job done in the rotation, a mid-3 ERA and FIP, more strikeouts than inning pitched. I mean, what more can you ask for from a guy who went into the season as the 5th starter? And then Braylon Marquez is having the best season of his career. He moved through the rotation because of Colby Allard's injury and has continued to be great in the rotation, and he was great in the bullpen. 92 strikeouts through 78 innings pitched, and he is still on fire. Well, speaking of Colby Allard, he was exceptional before that injury. He had a sub-2 ERA, a mid-3 FIP, so I mean, not a ton of strikeouts definitely contributes to the mid-3 FIP, but he's also maybe getting a bit of luck with the defense behind him. But even then, it's still a very impressive year for Allard, and he should be back in 2 to 3 weeks as well. So when he comes back, we'll have to make a decision on who's going to move to the bullpen and who's going to stay in the rotation. We're going to have to decide probably between Braylon Marquez and JB Bukauskas. And then on the injury screen, you probably saw that Mariano Vasquez is also on the IL long-term. He is out 6+ months with a torn rotator cuff, an absolutely brutal injury for a pitcher to get, but it also happens to be a really lucky way of keeping him in the organization, because right before he was getting hurt, I was like, you know, he throws super hard. His slider's actually pretty bad, though, so when I use him in game, he kind of gets knocked around a bit. He hasn't been that great. And then, boom, he gets hurt. So he's going to be hurt the rest of the year, and then he's just a full-time member of our organization next year, and we'll be free to send him up and down as we please. So super unfortunate for him. If this was real life, he probably wouldn't be coming back throwing 101, but this is a video game, so a guy gets a super brutal injury, and he comes back exactly the same. And then Keaton Middleton has actually been a pretty solid reliever for us this year. He's getting a much bigger workload than last year, where he's already 1 innings pitched away from matching his innings pitched from last season. Throughout the duration of this franchise, when he pitched with the Angels, they were using him like 99+ inning, or like 90+ innings every season. Last year, he barely got any. Maybe that's why he didn't pitch that great last year. He had a pretty good, decent year last year, that I remember, but he is definitely getting a much bigger workload this year. Domingo Acevedo, the hard-throwing righty, has been quite good at the pen for us, the 30-year-old rookie. He's striking out a ton of guys, not walking many guys. I'm a big fan of hard-throwing relievers who don't have control issues, so Domingo Acevedo, big fan. Jason Tuchman having quite a down year, unfortunately. He lost his closer job. He's now the setup man. Tanner Scott also having a down year, a 5 ERA and FIP. I mean, looking at his career stats, he seems to just alternate when he's dominant and when he's not great. So if he keeps that up, next year he'll be a top reliever in baseball again. But fortunately, even when Tanner Scott's having a down year, he is still able to go in there and strike a ton of people out. And then Yarlin Garcia is having an incredible year out of the bullpen. He has a 0.68 ERA, and because of that, he has been the guy to take over the closer spot as Jason Tuchman, like I said, moves to the setup role. And then Tyler Beede has been up in the bigs because of Vasquez's injury. He's been meh. He'll either be sent down soon, or he'll hold down the fort till Allard is back. And then you also see Willie Arroyo. He's actually been quite good in a bullpen role. He is extremely fun to pitch with in game. His windup is super smooth. He's accurate. He doesn't throw super hard, but he's able to just pin pitches on the corners. His splitter is nasty. He's just super fun to pitch with. And I don't care if I have too many lefties on my team. All my lefties can get out both kinds of hitters, so who really cares if I have a bunch of lefties? Also, I'm sure somebody will eventually comment, like, why does he wear a teal glove? I don't know, man. It looks cool. I got tired of all the orange gloves in this game just looking like red-brown. I mean, it literally looks like just a duplicate of the red-brown color in this game. It's not a bright orange glove like you see a lot of people on orange main teams have. So I wanted to have a cool glove on our team, and I'm a big fan of players wearing whatever gear they want, so he's going to wear a teal glove. And now moving on to the league leaders section of this episode, where, like I mentioned earlier, Joey Gallo leads the National League in home runs with 26, while Javi Baez and Elliot Ramos are tied with Ian Happ, and they all have 24 home runs. Elliot Ramos is also 4th in OPS, but he still is in the lead when it comes to WAR in the National League, and Josh James has been getting used a ton in Miami, and he's been great. Least amount of home runs allowed in the National League. He's 4th in strikeouts, so Josh James finally putting things together as a member of the Miami Marlins. While Julio Urias, you probably saw, leads the league in strikeouts, ERA, and WAR. It's also been a great year to be a guy with the last name Urias, as Luis Urias, the former Padre, is having a career year in his first year with the Los Angeles Angels. He leads the American League in average, hits, WAR, and he's also 4th in OPS. The league leader in the American League in OPS is Carlos Correa, but he's hurt. Shocker. And then on the pitching side of things, in the American League, there's Carlos Martinez, who has a sub-2 ERA, so that's very impressive from the former Cardinal, now Astro. But Parker Bridwell has been the real story in the American League. He's just all of a sudden one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's like I think he's like an early 30s guy. He started the All-Star game for the American League. He's 2nd in ERA. He leads in WHIP. He just won Pitcher of the Month in June. And the thing is, Parker Bridwell didn't even pitch in the big leagues from 2019 all the way to 2021. And then he was decent in 2022. He was bad in 2023, and then the last 2 years, he's just been exceptional. Low 2 ERA both seasons. I'm pretty sure he was an all-star last year as well. Oh, would you look at that? The guy has got a high walk per 9 rating, also known as the guaranteed good pitcher rating in this game. It's also worth mentioning that Shohei Ohtani has finally figured out how to pitch well in this game as he leads the American League in strikeouts. Throughout the duration of this franchise, and I've had people tell me that this is just how Ohtani is in this game. I believe my buddy Bo told me that in his franchises, Ohtani is always garbage at pitching, and that was the case for the longest time in this as well, as you can see by his stats, but this year he's starting to finally figure it out as he's been actually a pretty decent pitcher, and then he's also just been a great hitter throughout this entire franchise. But now he's actually a great hitter and a pretty good pitcher. And like I mentioned, we are going to take a look at some AAA guys. The first guy on the list is Carmen Castaneda. He was actually signed right at the start of the season, not in the offseason, but like right after spring training and right at the start of the regular season. He was just sitting in free agency as a 23-year-old C-potential player. He was previously with the Seattle Mariners, so I signed him, and he's been fantastic in AAA, and because of that, he has actually boosted his potential to a B. So we will likely see him in the big leagues pretty soon, as we do have a couple spots in the majors of guys not performing in the outfield, and that does line up well with Castaneda being very good in the AAA this year. It's also worth mentioning that I went like 6 seasons in this franchise where like nobody went up with their potential rating. They would not go down or up with their potential rating. And then at the end of last year, Cesar Izturis went from a C to B. And then after a few good months in AAA, Carmen Castaneda goes up from a C to a B in AAA. Just both around the same time. So I don't know if they made a patch with this game where that happens more often, or I'm just getting to the point where things start working a bit different in a franchise because they don't expect people to actually play a franchise for more than like 30 minutes. But that is something that I've definitely noticed happens more often now. We also have Chip Driver in AAA. That is right, Chip Driver. What a name. He's also been great in AAA. He can play all over the infield, though I probably wouldn't play him at shortstop in the big leagues. He has a solid bat, and he's got a great mustache. So Chip Driver is a guy who is a depth option in the infield. Cesar Izturis would probably already be in the big leagues for Peter Mooney if he didn't get hurt. He's on the IL right now with a torn finger ligament. That's a mouthful. He was performing quite well in AAA, and then he went down with that injury, so we might very well see him in the bigs this season once he gets back from that injury. Leonardo Rivas would probably be in the big leagues already, since he is on the 40-man, but he's been bad in AAA. He has one great skill offensively, and that is his ability to get on base. He has like a 90-plus plate discipline, but he's got a 299 OBP in AAA. So if you can't get on base in AAA, I'm not going to call you up to the major leagues and hope you can get on base in the big leagues. And then Reynel Delgado has not been called up yet because he has had a rough year in AAA, a sub-600 OPS with plenty of ABs. He's just trying to grind through it, and he's just not been that great this year. If he goes on a hot streak, though, I might decide to call him up, but we'll have to see how I feel about that when the time comes. But with that being said, that is going to wrap things up here for this edition of the San Francisco Giants franchise. The next episode you see will probably include the trade deadline. I'll say it might be 1 game before the deadline, then the deadline, and then 2 games after. It might be 2 games before, then show the deadline, then show 1 game after. We'll see how I feel. I'll take a look at the matchups to see which one I want to play. I still need to play those games, so I obviously can't tell you what's going to happen, or who we're going to play, or what the situation is going to be with how many games before and after. But with that being said, I've been your host, Jerseyborn, and I am saying, Mike Ford is like the 5th best first baseman in the Yankees organization, and he's out here just taking tanks at the major league level. Just throwing that out there.